Hi again. So today it's the fourth lesson, and this is going to be a shorter one from my point of view, because I'm going to give you as best approach this time an article to read, and I'm just going to make some highlights to help you. So the topic of today is coupled human natural systems. In this slide, you might remember from our previous discussions that we have the issue of sustainability science on one side, and the relation between humans and our planet on the other hand. So the science and the techno-biosphere. Well, all these are about the interdependencies between human and natural systems. And if you look more attentively to this cluster analysis, the colored cluster on the left, you see different topics that are formulated, like urban planning, health, forestry, fisheries, things like that, which actually are topics of practice, not so much topics of academic study. Well, that's because it's about human in the natural systems and those relations. But in order to take a planetary view, overall view, you see in this next slide, the best way for me to introduce you to the topic is, instead of giving you lots of examples, is to just point to you this article that you see on the left, Coupled Human and Natural Systems, that you must read, which is written by a team of very famous people, actually. All of them are famous in the sustainability science and the practice. And you have no mathematical effort to make or something. It's really a nice article to read, a good synthesis of what coupled human and natural systems are. Now, this is an article a bit older, from 2007, but it's very actual. Nothing changed since then. However, in terms of concrete practice, I want to give you some highlights, and I start with something very important for our content here, and that is the European Water Framework Directive. Why is this important? Beside the fact that water is very important, and beside also the fact that my expertise is very related to water, it is important because the objective of this Water Framework Directive was and still is to achieve good status of European waters by 2015, which is this year. There is a small analysis, which I point to you on the right side of the slide here, done by somebody that is an expert in water issues, pollution and European policy. The author there you see, Claudia Palvosu. And in the abstract, I highlight with red something that is extraordinarily relevant to the issue of coupled human and natural systems, and is a good summary also of what we have been discussing in the previous lessons. So you see that they started quite chaotically, put it shortly, and top down, and gradually all these people coming from all these 28 nations, actually more than that, because it includes Norway, Switzerland and all that, they have in their country different traditions, different approaches, different legislation. How do you put all these together? So there was an entire process, and you see that if you look closer, you see that there is a very interesting process of learning from top-down command to more market-based and then more participatory approaches. So including, beside the environmental issues of pollutions, thresholds and all that, the economic aspects and the social aspects. because otherwise it's not doable. And then you observe a gradual shift from the strong promotion of simplistic panaceas. We're going to do it like that and we're going to make it, to more context-sensitive approaches that are more realistic. Now, all you have to know about this article on water policy is what I just said in this part of the slide. If you want to look more, you can check this source, the hyperlink, and that's it. Your purpose is to read this article, and I'm going to just make some quick highlights in this slide. So this is the article. You can click to download it. You must read it, so this is not a recommended reading. You must read it. It's your homework, and it's also a good moment for you to start making those knowledge maps. If you remember from the previous lessons, right from the beginning, I said that the way I will evaluate your work will be through a written work that you will present to me in the form of visual representation of knowledge and the consequences for practice. I'm going to help you do that through interaction online and also live when we'll have the occasion through these practicals, or travaux dirigés as we say in French. So because this is such a nice synthesis, you can already start to write on a paper or on your PowerPoint slide the items, the correlations, arrows. You can use circles, whatever shapes you want. It's your tool that you develop for your using projects. May I just point to you some keywords that you will meet in the article, and which are very important. These are the emergent properties, vulnerability, thresholds and resilience, and the rest. I don't want to go through all that. You will see it yourself in the film. But what I want to highlight, however, and I'm starting in this slide, is the issue of vulnerability and the relation with the level of development of countries or of any community, if you want. On this slide, on the left side, you see a graph that represents the correlation between poverty and vulnerability. Here, poverty is basically represented by the Human Development Index. This is an index made by the United Nations, and includes different parameters, but essentially it shows how rich a country is, how developed a country is. And then there is the index of climate hazard, which shows the vulnerability. Now, if you look on the graph, there is a correlation, pretty important correlation, between these two. And you realize that the less developed countries, those that have low values with the HDI, the Human Development Index, they are the most vulnerable. There are also two big outliers here, China and India, and that's because being so big, with such a big population, these countries are also harder to manage, and they encompass different geographic areas and so on. So they have some supplementary reasons why they are more vulnerable than the level of development would indicate. So this is something important that you should remember. The Human Development Index, the development of the countries. I want to make another point here. I select for you, from all these thousands of articles, those that seem to be the most simple and the most representative. And in this lesson, actually, I only have articles by people that are very famous. They are kind of legends in the sustainability discussions. And this article is co-authored by three people or like that. If you type in Google, Scholar Google, these names, you'll find more articles about them, or written by them. In this next slide, I want to make two small points again. The first, if you look on the left, you see that all continents evolved since 1970 about the same way. They took an upward direction in terms of extreme weather impacts. That's the main idea. Okay, Americas, they have higher levels of extreme weather impacts, in Europe less, but all of them are in the same tendency. And by the way, this is data until 2010. I looked for more recent data, but I didn't find yet, so I think this report was not renewed yet. These kind of reports are done once every 5 years, something like that, so maybe it will come soon. But if you remember from the news, during the last 5 years, there were some big events, weather events in Europe during this time, the last 5 years. So I don't think that Europe is kind of protected or anything. Every continent is in the same story here. So the second point on this slide is that vulnerability is related to development. And development is usually measured as GDP, like gross domestic product. How much money you make, how much money are flowing in the economy. And there is a lot of discussion because this GDP is not fully representative for what is happening in a society. Different indexes have been proposed, including indices related to sustainability. The problem is, sustainability is still a controversial concept. If you ask some people in the university what is sustainability, I think most of the time they would say, okay, it's about the environment, especially in the Western world. But if you ask people from the business, they would say, oh, business sustainability, yes, a business that actually manages to thrive for a long time. Nothing related to environment or planet. But even if you consider sustainability, including environment, society and economics, you still have a lot of debate. What does it mean systemically? So it's a lot of unclarities. So to launch worldwide an index about sustainability is very difficult. People will not easily accept it. But there are some easier to understand indices, and that's one example here. The Legatum Prosperity Index. Okay, you say prosperity, it's more than GDP, but everybody can understand. Okay, I think we know what is prosperity, how good you progress and you're doing. And they use more than just GDP. That's an important point to make. We want to save the planet. We have to take into account the environment. But in the end, it's about what people want, and that is prosperity. It's part of it. If we just go to, oh, let's protect the environment, it will not work. Or it will work just to a limited extent. So if you want to check a bit this, you can click on the hyperlink and you will open it. And by the way, it's done these days, on the 2nd of November, published this report. So it's a new one. So that's it with my highlights, and do your reading. You can read it once, twice, 3 times, as many times as necessary for you to clarify things, because let me tell this to you, you will not find too many articles that are so clear. Such a good synthesis you find every few years, so use it. I will be ready to answer your questions as usual, and until next time, bye.